Asura before leading Han Shuo to the meeting place. The meeting location that Tyre, Log, and Wasir selected were not the Omphalos. Fighting was strictly prohibited in the Omphalos, as it was the trading center of the Fringe. The three sovereigns would not violate that rule as they were the people who were supposed to enforce it. That was why they had selected an extinguished volcano in the northwest as the meeting place. It was because of the meeting location the three had selected that Asura warned Han Shuo to be careful. If Tyre, Log, and Wasir wished to speak peacefully with Han Shuo, they would have set up the meeting somewhere in the Omphalos. But them having selected a secluded and uninhabited extinct volcano meant that they intend to do more than talking. Han Shuo wasn't afraid of the three sovereigns ganging up on him. As Han Shuo and Asura head for the extinct volcano, they chatted about recent happenings relaxedly. The extinct volcano made of dark red rocks soon entered their sight. It was barren. There were neither plants nor animals. Han Shuo sensed the life forces of Tyre, Log, and Wasir before he was even near the volcano. The three did not conceal their auras, and Han Shuo sensed the three's location with just one pulse of his consciousness. Han Shuo received a slight shock after taking a moment to carefully sense their auras. He sensed that the life force gave off by Tyre was much stronger than that of Log and Wasir. It seemed that the hearsay of Tyre being the strongest sovereign in the Fringe was indeed true. His strength was without a doubt greater than Log and Wasir's. "Haha, welcome, welcome. It's great to finally meet the talented young man who has defeated Salas." A burst of cordial laughter sounded from a bulky and masculine man standing on top of the extinct volcano. His voice was loud, clear, and rather pleasing to the ear. Tyre did not look as treacherous and sinister as Han Shuo had imagined. In fact, he looked like a frank, guileless gentleman. Han Shuo had not expected that. Log and Wasir, however, were nothing like Tyre. Log nodded at Han Shuo as greeting, while Wasir wore an unconcerned face and did not even acknowledge Han Shuo's arrival. After Han Shuo and Asura landed on the extinct volcano, Tyre yet again laughed before saying, "The Fringe has been peaceful for a long time, and I've gotten rather bored." "Haha, but luckily you have come to make things interesting again. That Sala's bastard is indeed an idiot to find you trouble. Served him right, he got kicked in the butt." Tyre talked to Han Shuo like they had been friends for a long time. Those who didn't know better might even be fooled. "Haha, you're welcome," replied Han Shuo in a friendly smile as he secretly sized up Tyre. Although Tyre seemed like an honest man on the outside, his eyes, however, brightly glistened with lights of wisdom. After a moment of careful observation, Han Shuo could tell that Tyre was a formidable character. He felt that it would be much harder to defeat Tyre than all other sovereigns. He knew from experience that a person who looked honest on the outside was usually more treacherous than those who were sinister looking. Han Shuo had already taken Tyre as his most formidable opponent in the Fringe. While Han Shuo was sizing up Tyre, Tyre was also secretly sizing up Han Shuo. The more he observed Han Shuo, the more puzzled he became. As the energy Han Shuo cultivated was unlike the fundamental forces practiced in this universe, Tyre could not determine Han Shuo's true strength. And when Han Shuo stood still, it felt as though he had fused with the environment. When Tyre closed his eyes, he would feel as though Han Shuo wasn't even there, that he was just one of those rocks around him. The less he understood Han Shuo, the more cautious he became. He secretly gave Log and Wasir meaningful glances, hinting at them to use a softer approach. "Ahem. So gentlemen, how may I assist you?" asked Han Shuo after sizing up the three sovereigns. Log put on a faint smile and cordially said to Han Shuo, "We know that those god hunters outside the Omphalos are related to you. Haha, that's why we have been doing nothing all these, while even though they had been causing so much trouble." Log forced a smile and seemed embarrassed as he said, "We know it's proper for it to be chaotic outside the Omphalos. However, if this keeps going, without any supplies entering Omphalos, the businesses in the trading center won't be able to sustain themselves. No Fringe dweller would wish to see the Omphalos gone. That's why we are suggesting that." Han Shuo patiently listened to Log's explanation with a faint smile. And after Log was done, he put on an equally embarrassed face and said, "Well, I can see that they are in a tough situation. Without sufficient supplies, it would be difficult to sustain their businesses. Sigh, what a shame that they couldn't just charge people for entering the Omphalos. Then they could just rock their feet as black crystal coins came rolling in. Wasier coldly groaned and said in a cold voice, Brian, the fringe has its rules, and your actions have broken those rules. Han Shuo acted as though he was astounded. He looked at Wasier with astonished gazes and said, The rules of the fringe are set by you gentlemen. If you can make those rules, why can't I? Hee, do you think that I'm not qualified to do so? Just how long has it been since you stepped into the fringe? You think you can just walk in here and take a piece of the pie? Wasier sneered and disdainfully said, Don't tell me that you really consider yourself stronger than Sala's. You've only managed to beat him because he had exhausted his divine energy after fighting Asura. Han Shuo's face turned dark and he stared intensely at Wasier. After a few seconds, Han Shuo grinned and challenged, I wonder if you dare fight me in a duel, Wasier. Chapter 889, Han Shuo vs. Wasier GDK 889. Han Shuo vs. Wasier. Han Shuo could not defeat Tyre, Log, and Wasier all at once. But if he only had to fight Wasier, Han Shuo was confident that he could win. The fringe had always been a place where the person with the biggest fist made the rule. Sometimes, instead of a lengthy feudal argument, it was better to let the fists do the talking. From how Han Shuo saw it, Wasier was not just the weakest of the three, but also the most annoying. By fighting Wasier, Han Shuo could demonstrate that he possessed the strength to take Sala's place in the Omphalos and also kick Wasier's ass. Wasier did not expect that Han Shuo would challenge him to a fight. Under the threatening gaze of Han Shuo, Wasier turned from arrogant to hesitant. Fighting Han Shuo one-on-one was nowhere in Wasier's plan. Before the meeting, Wasier, Tyre, and Log had reached an agreement to gang up against Han Shuo. They thought that Han Shuo would never be able to escape from them if they joined forces. That was why Wasier had spoken to Han Shuo with such contempt. Tyre, Log, and Wasier weren't all that close. In fact, they had always been fighting each other for a bigger share of the fringe. Tyre seemed very astonished to hear Han Shuo challenge Wasier to a duel without thinking. He stared deeply at Han Shuo for a second before he laughed. Brother, you are truly filled with heroic spirit. No wonder you have stood out in the fringe in such little time. Tyre did not comment on the challenge Han Shuo issued at Wasier, and he showed no intention to de-escalate the situation. A thought crossed Log's mind. He turned to the hesitant Wasier and mocked, Wasier, you ain't afraid of him, are ya? Wasier was enraged for he understood what Tyre and Log's intentions were. Tyre and Log did not have a clear idea of Han Shuo's true strength. Although all the sovereigns were present when Han Shuo fought Sala's, the battle was just too brief to tell anything for sure. Besides, as Sala's had been fighting Asura prior to that, they could not determine Han Shuo's strength without a wide margin of error. It was because of this substantial room of uncertainty that back then, Log and Wasier had not taken any rash action, and instead left the pandemonium right away. This was also the reason that the three sovereigns had taken no action against Han Hao's rampant looting of those Omphalos merchants for such a long time. The three sovereigns were patient characters. They took no uncertainty to chance, especially not with Han Shuo's strength. The three sovereigns had only invited Han Shuo to the meeting after they reached an agreement where the three of them would join forces and end Han Shuo's life on the extinct volcano if Han Shuo proved too stubborn to be reasoned with. But after suddenly hearing Han Shuo challenge Wasier to a fight, Tyre and Log realized that being able to determine Han Shuo's true strength without risking injuries themselves would be an even more fantastic deal. If Han Shuo then demonstrated supreme strength, where the three of them could not keep Han Shuo trapped, Tyre and Log could maintain their current relationship with Han Shuo and not make a powerful enemy for now. But if Han Shuo wasn't as powerful as they thought, they could step into the battle without notice and join hands with Wasier to kill Han Shuo. It took Tyre and Log no time to realize that having Wasier and Han Shuo fight would be more beneficial for them than all three of them joining forces to attack Han Shuo. Therefore, Tyre had not tried to de-escalate the tension, while Log tried to provoke Wasier. In his mind, Wasier chided himself for being too impulsive while cursing Tyre and Log for their deviousness. With Han Shuo sneering at him, Wasier did not know which if I accept the challenge, I'll fall right into Tyre and Log's ruse. If I decline, Others might think that I'm afraid of that kid and boost his morale. Grr/I did not know which choice to make, especially with Han Shuo sneering at him. The sneering Han Shuo knew exactly what was on Wasir, Tyre, and Log's minds. Seeing that Wasir was still hesitant, Han Shuo added, "Don't worry, we have no quarrels with each other, so we ain't going to fight till the death. Hee, consider it a friendly match if you may. That shouldn't be a problem for you, should it?" Han Shuo did not want Wasir to decline the challenge, and with Tyre and Log around, he did not want to fight Wasir until one of them was dead. All Han Shuo wanted was to kick Wasir's ass to demonstrate his strength and go home. "Wasir, what's wrong with you today? You are acting much more timid than usual. Haven't you heard what Brian said? What are you still worrying about? Could it be that you are afraid of fighting him?" Hee, said Log in jest. With things having come to this, Wasir knew that he could not avoid a battle with Han Shuo. He silently cursed Tyre and Log and all their ancestors before he coldly nodded and said, "A fight you will have. I don't believe that you possess the power to defeat Salas. You only won because you were lucky." Han Shuo was delighted to hear Wasir rise to the challenge. Compared to Tyre and Log, Wasir's strength and realm state were slightly poorer. Of the three sovereigns, Wasir's butt was the easiest to kick. Then, without any warning, Han Shuo spread his hands, and the demonic blades shot out from the tips of his fingers. The sharp blades glistened with chilling radiances. After advancing to the Skybreak realm, all of the demonic techniques that Han Shuo mastered had strengthened in tandem. Powered by the new form of demonic yuan, the demonic blades formed were even more damaging than the average demonic weapon. As the demonic blades were connected to his fingertips, he could extend and retract those blades freely, giving him a unique advantage in close-quarter combat. Wasir cultivated the energy of water. After staying on his glacial peak for a long time, Wasir deciphered and mastered the other form of the water energy. The energy of water manifested as the energy of ice had outstanding defensive and offensive power. It was most suitable for use in close-quarter combat. It was obvious from his demonic blades that Han Shuo wanted to fight Wasir in close-quarter combat. He was not afraid of Wasir's strong suit. However, instead of appreciating it, Wasir considered that an insult. Han Shuo choosing to fight him in close-quarter combat had angered Wasir. He shouted, "Kid, you are asking for it?" As Wasir spoke, a thick layer of ice grew around him. Under the illumination of the bright sun, Wasir seemed to have transformed into an enormous, sparkling, beautiful diamond. Although Wasir was inside a thick layer of ice, somehow, it did not affect Wasir's movement. His two hands could still move around as though they were still in empty air. Although Wasir's body was protected under tough, solid ice, his limbs were not frozen, but as fluid as water. Wasir was indeed worthy of being called an overgod of water. His understanding of the two different but equally profound sides of the element of water had reached a profound level. When Han Shuo saw that Wasir was ready for battle, he knew that he had accomplished his goal. He wasted no words with Wasir. Han Shuo knew all kinds of complicated and gaudy ranged attacks, but he forsook them for close-quarter combat. He charged at Wasir at his highest speed. The chilling demonic blades constructed with fingernails, as its base were terrifyingly lethal once they were filled with demonic yuan. I/I, a sharp, clear ringing sound sounded when the demonic blade on Han Shuo's left middle finger made contact with the ice on Wasir's chest. Wasir did not expect that Han Shuo could move so fast. He only saw a dazzling flash before Han Shuo was right in front of him. While he was moving to intercept the attack, his chest was struck. He's faster than I am/I, concluded Wasir. Wasir's mastery of the energy of ice was indeed profound. Although Han Shuo managed to take the first hit, the incredibly incisive blade did not manage to destroy that thick layer of ice defending Wasir. It had only managed to scrape off a few inches of ice. Although Wasir was a little slow, he had still managed to land attacks on Han Shuo. He thrust the two swords he made from ice at Han Shuo's chest. I/I, an enormous force suddenly erupted from Han Shuo's chest, and Wasir was flung backward. Sovereign Tyre, Log, and Asura, who were watching from the sidelines, suddenly opened their eyes wide and gasped in disbelief. They could very clearly see that Han Shuo did not form any defensive barrier around his body, and he wasn't wearing any divine armor. There was just a thin, dark warrior's gown over his skin. This meant that Wasir's strike on Han Shuo's chest was a direct hit. There was nothing to absorb or dissipate the formidable force, other than Han Shuo's skin and flesh. There were all kinds of gods who cultivated in all kinds of fundamental forces all over Elysium. Some of them possessed extremely tough divine bodies. However, they had never seen any being who could resist an attack without boundary, divine armor, or any defensive measures, but with just the most basic toughness of their body. Tyre and Log were astounded. They were certain that if it was they themselves who had taken this strike of Wasir's without any defensive measures alongside their bare bodies, they would have been severely injured. They were not aware of any being on Elysium who possessed a body of such toughness that could directly sustain such a mighty blow without suffering any injury. Perhaps even an over-god with the quintessence could not do so. Tyre and Log showed mixed emotions in their eyes. They became more and more amazed by Han Shuo. Chapter 890, Splitting GDK 890. Splitting while Tyre and Log let their imagination run wild, Han Shuo and Wasir continued to fight ferociously. They had turned into two blurry figures that repeatedly clashed and produced loud clangs. Wasir had wrapped himself in a thick layer of protective ice from head to toe. He formed a sword using the energy of ice and stabbed Han Shuo with it. However, it would always be recoiled by Han Shuo's omen invincible body and couldn't cause him any harm. Han Shuo, too, was unable to cause Wasir any harm. His demonic blades could only penetrate a few inches of the protective ice, not nearly enough to reach Wasir, who was under the thick ice. His attacks would only leave white trails on the surface of the ice. Both Han Shuo and Wasir understood that there was no such thing as an impregnable defense. Han Shuo's omen invincible body and Wasir's protective ice required demonic yuan and divine energy. Every time they suffered an attack, they would exhaust some amount of demonic yuan or divine energy to neutralize the attacking power. And once any of them runs out of energy, their defense will naturally collapse. By then, their seemingly impregnable defense will crumble like a dried leaf. The duel had turned into a battle of attrition. The one with more energy will eventually win, but Han Shuo was not willing to spend too much energy on Wasir. If he were to exhaust too much energy on fighting Wasir, Tyre and Log, who was watching nearby, might jump into the battle and join forces with Wasir to kill him. Although Asura was also watching, Han Shuo would not depend his life on him. He did not think that Asura would help him against Tyre and Log. Therefore, Han Shuo had to look for another approach in order to break the stalemate. While wearing down his energy with Wasir, an idea suddenly crossed Han Shuo's mind. He began attacking Wasir with a different method. Han Shuo's consciousness suddenly produced an undulation barely visible to the naked eye. It had locked on Wasir's divine soul and pounced on it. Wasir, who was busy defending against Han Shuo's melee attacks, suddenly felt an intense pricking pain in his mind. He sensed that an incisive soul energy had intruded his mind and started a ferocious attack against his divine soul. The sudden soul attack had thrown Wasir into a panic. Fear was visible in his eyes. Of the 12 fundamental forces, cultivators of the energies of life, death, and destiny had the greatest mastery over the soul. Cultivators of the energy of water were relatively poor in this aspect, but Han Shuo's mastery of the soul was so immensely profound that it was beyond what can be achieved by the cultivators of the 3 energies. After Han Shuo's consciousness intruded into Wasir's mind, it spread and transformed into a large net, covering Wasir's divine soul. The incorporeal net formed using hundreds of thousands of strands of the consciousness were contracting bit by bit, producing the unbearable pricking pain in Wasir's divine soul. As a cultivator of demonic arts, Han Shuo had not only forged his body to be incredibly tough, he had even formed an incredibly powerful consciousness that possessed abilities beyond the imagination of an ordinary being. Although Wasir's physical defensive power was indeed extraordinary, he wasn't nearly as good when it comes to his divine soul. By attacking Wasir's divine soul with his consciousness, Han Shuo had gained a strong upper hand. The body's defensive and offensive capabilities were strongly tied to the soul. The moment that Han Shuo started attacking with his consciousness, Wasir's body movement started turning awkward and sluggish. Even his eyes were no longer radiating confidence, but seemed somewhat frightened. The face of the observant Log suddenly jolted. As a cultivator of the energy of death, he had a profound level of mastery in the soul. He was the first to detect Han Shuo's consciousness attacking Wasir's mind. After carefully sensing using his divine soul, Log discovered that he had absolutely no idea which energy Han Shuo's consciousness belonged to. He was also startled to observe that Han Shuo's consciousness energy had transformed into thousands of strands to make a spider-like web. It was unlike anything he had seen before, or anything close to his imagination. His gaze towards Han Shuo turned greatly cautious. "It's a soul attack," under Tyre's inquisitive gazes, Log softly explained. "He has an extremely profound level of mastery over the soul. It's beyond miraculous. That soul attack of his is directly impacting Wasir's strength." Tyre, too, put on an astonished face, and his eyes glimmered with indecisive light. With the consciousness attack, Han Shuo was gaining a stronger and stronger position over Wasir. The thick layer of ice that protected Wasir started to crack, and fissure lines were rapidly spreading. It seemed as though the ice would shatter at any moment. At this trend, it won't be long before Wasir would crumble to Han Shuo's wild bombardment. But it was at this moment that Han Shuo had suddenly withdrawn. He had not only stopped the physical attack on Wasir, even the consciousness energy that intruded Wasir's mind was withdrawn. Wasir found it extremely difficult to defend against the attacks on his body and soul, and he became more and more terrified. He thought that he would be severely injured by Han Shuo, but suddenly, the intense pain vanished from his divine soul, and he felt as though he was set free. After pulling a distance from Wasir, Han Shuo put on a faint smile and calmly said, "I believe that there's no need to continue the duel. Wasir's strength is indeed outstanding." Before the battle, Han Shuo was not polite in attitude, but after winning the duel, he turned modest and courteous. Wasir first examined his divine body and divine soul. After making sure that Han Shuo did not do anything despicable to him in secret, he looked at Han Shuo with eyes showing a complex mix of emotions and said, "I don't need you to save me face. I admit I'm not as strong as you are." Han Shuo was astounded. He thought that perhaps of all the sovereigns, Wasir was the easiest to get along with. Wasir's openness and willingness to admit defeat had left a good impression on Han Shuo, and perhaps Wasir wasn't as annoying as he thought. Without a battle to the death, it is very difficult to tell who would actually win or lose. There are just too many variables in a battle. Even the tiniest change to the tiniest thing could alter the outcome. Therefore, this duel can only be considered as a tie. "You have not lost," said Han Shuo in a calm smile. Wasir was puzzled, and he couldn't understand why Han Shuo would say so or behave so politely. He looked at Han Shuo with suspicious eyes, as though trying to determine what exactly was Han Shuo planning. In the fringe, every sovereign would try to prove that he is the strongest at all costs. Only then would those ferocious gods migrating from every corner of the Elysium prefer to submit to their sovereignty, growing the power under their command. Back then in the Pandemonium, when Asura saw that Salas had exhausted a good amount of divine energy to the demonic formations, he had immediately provoked Salas to a battle. He wanted to use the opportunity to prove to everyone that he was stronger than Salas. Log and Wasir went to the Pandemonium with similar intentions. However, after overpowering Wasir in every aspect, not only did Han Shuo not mock him arrogantly, he had even modestly claimed that the battle was a tie. Wasir could not understand Han Shuo's intention. After looking carefully into Han Shuo's eyes for a moment, Wasir found not a trace of disdain or mockery. This made him even more puzzled. It's over." "That's too soon," Log smilingly said. "We haven't had a winner yet." Wasir was angered. He cast his cold eyes on Log and remarked, "I believe that Brian is fully capable of substituting Sala's place in the Omphalos. If you disagree, you may test his strength yourself." Log stared blankly for a moment, not expecting Wasir to side with Han Shuo. After looking at Wasir with puzzled eyes, he realized that Wasir must be angry with Tyre and him for their actions earlier. He lightly chuckled and said, "I don't think that's appropriate. Brian has just fought you. It's not fair to duel with him now. Perhaps we might do that sometime in the future." "Hee hee, since when have you started caring what's appropriate?" sneered Wasier. He knew that taking advantage of others was Log's favorite activity. The fact that Log did not immediately attack Han Shuo could only mean one thing: he did not have the confidence to defeat Han Shuo. Log wasn't embarrassed by the comment at all, and he still wore the same faint smile. He turned to Tyre and asked, "So, what do you think?" With things having come to this, Tyre was uncertain of Wasier's intention. Without Wasier's assistance, Tyre and Log did not have absolute confidence in killing Han Shuo. He was also worried about the scheming Asura who was standing nearby. Tyre understood that Han Shuo must have seen through their scheme. That was the reason he had withdrawn after gaining an upper hand in the duel. Leveraging on the fact that Wasier was angry at Tyre and Log, Han Shuo took initiative to show goodwill to Wasier to make him hesitate, enlarging the rift between the three sovereigns and breaking their fragile alliance. This youngster is anything but easy to deal with. Thought Tyre. With Wasier now possibly not going to honor their original agreement, Tyre knew that the original plan was no longer feasible. He thought about it for a moment and immediately came up with another plan. He laughed out loud before saying, "Well done, brother. Youth indeed breeds heroism. You have demonstrated your strength through that battle just now. We have no doubt of your capability, but..." Han Shuo creased a brow, and in a slightly deeper tone, he asked, "Oh, is there something else?" Tyre put on a bitter smile and nodded. He continued, "But Salaz is not yet dead. He is only in hiding to recover his strength. If we are to let you take his place in the Omphalos, things could get troublesome for us when he returns." Tyre took a short pause before he said, "But if you can get rid of Salaz and eliminate this possibility, we would gladly accept you as one of Omphalos' managers. This you have nothing to worry about. If Salaz ever returns to the Fringe, the first person he will look for is me. By then, I will end him myself. If I then lose to Salaz, everything will just be returned to Salaz. You guys have nothing to do with this." "So I don't get what trouble it is that you mean," replied Han Shuo immediately. He had thought of this question long ago and wouldn't be fooled by that flimsy excuse of Tyre. "That's right. The person that Salaz hates the most is Brian. If he even returns, the first thing he will do is look for Brian to get his revenge. By then, the person who wins will take over the 10 sovereign shops and continue to manage the Omphalos. We do not know when or if Salaz will ever return to the Fringe. I can't see why it'd be inappropriate to have Brian substitute Salaz's place when he is not in the Fringe." Tyre knew that Asura was on Han Shuo's side. He nodded at Asura and did not comment about it. Then, Tyre turned to Wasier and asked, "What do you think?" Tyre wasn't sure of Wasier's position. He wanted to determine Wasier's position through the question to decide if he should take the riskier option. Wasier hesitated. He looked at Han Shuo while weighing his options. He knew that Tyre and Log definitely did not want Han Shuo to join them as one of Omphalos' managers, and the final decision now comes down to him. If Wasier disagreed, it would be 3 against 2. But Wasier was still angry at Tyre and Log for their petty plots earlier. He had been thinking about how to get even at the two. While looking at the smiling Han Shuo, Wasier somehow got the feeling that Han Shuo was much more mannered than Tyre and Log. With that, he came to a decision. Wasier nodded and said, "I think Asura's words make sense." Tyre's face jolted very slightly after hearing Wasier's answer. He nodded at Wasier, forced a smile, and said, "Since Wasier and Asura approve of the motion, then it is decided. All right, Brian, I will talk to those merchants and straighten things out." "Oh, thanks a lot," said Han Shuo smilingly. He nodded at Wasier and indicated his appreciation with his eyes. "But before you move into the Omphalos, I hope that you will do the Fringe a favor. This involves all of us." It seemed as though Tyre wouldn't let Han Shuo move into the Omphalos smoothly. He threw yet another problem at Han Shuo. Under Han Shuo's attentive gaze, Tyre angrily said, "The God Hunter Alliance has always wanted to invade the Fringe and make it their base. And in recent times, those of the Alliance are becoming more and more out of control. Many of the experts moving into the Fringe have been recruited by the Alliance before they could step in here. The number of true experts migrating into the Fringe has recently been declining. Brian, I know that Han Hao is closely related to you. I also know that Han Hao is associated with the God Hunter Alliance. I hope you understand that if the God Hunter Alliance managed to take control of the Fringe and make it their base, it will only destroy the fringe. For eons, although we have been chaotic in the fringe, we would never go out and attack those in the 12 dominions. But the God Hunter Alliance is different. They have been causing havoc in every dominion, and everyone wants to exterminate them. If they succeed in making the fringe their base, the fringe will be destroyed. And what can I do about that? Han Shuo started getting a headache. This problem raised by Tyre was not unfounded. If the fringe became the headquarters of the God Hunter Alliance, the 12 dominions would unite and send their divine guards to raise the fringe to dust. Han Hao commands the biggest God Hunter faction in the fringe. Make Han Hao split from the God Hunter Alliance or have him leave the fringe with his God Hunters. Otherwise, it will only be a matter of time before he brings calamity to the fringe, said Tyre. Chapter 891, Beware GDK 891. Beware the relationship between Han Shuo and Han Hao was more profound than any person could understand. They had lived far apart for decades. After enduring those years and finally being able to live in the same region, Han Shuo would not allow Han Hao to leave him. However, the issue raised by Tyre was a serious issue. The God Hunter Alliance was notorious in all 12 dominions for their misdeeds. Countless family clans dedicated their lives to eradicating the alliance. If they knew that the God Hunter Alliance had moved their headquarters to the fringe, Han Shuo could not be more certain that the top experts from all 12 dominions would join forces to flatten the land. Brian, this is a very real issue. For all these years, there have been countless criminals who migrated into the fringe and submitted to our sovereignties. They had and are causing a lot of chaos, but it is always limited to the fringe. Under our sovereignty, they would never return to the dominions and cause havoc. Asura bunched his brows gravely and explained, "The 12 overgods have allowed the fringe to exist because all the outrageous things that happen here don't spread to their dominions. In fact, they could not be happier to see us kill each other in this land. The God Hunter Alliance, however, is different. They do not limit themselves to the fringe. I hope you will take this seriously." Han Shuo knew the seriousness of this problem. After hearing the sovereign's words, Han Shuo nodded and responded, "I will take care of it." "All right. As long as you can settle this issue, you can have a piece of the Omphalos," said Tyre in a big smile. The God Hunter Alliance has always wanted to make the fringe their territory. The only reason they haven't made any real attempt is that they are afraid of the 5 of us. We may compete and fight against each other in the fringe, but we will and we must always stand united against the God Hunter Alliance. That's right. The God Hunter Alliance is the public enemy of the entire Elysium. We fringe dwellers need to be united against them for the survival of our land, said Log gravely. It appeared that the sovereigns had a consensus on this issue. That's enough. I've said that I'll take care of it. Han Shuo bunched his brows and said in a rather annoyed manner. All right, then the meeting is adjourned. We will let you have the sovereign shops previously owned by Salas. Just send your people to take over those shops. Tyre nodded, transformed into a dark trail, and vanished. Haha, welcome aboard. Log congratulated Han Shuo smilingly before leaving the extinct volcano. Then it was Wasir's turn. He cast a few cold glances at Han Shuo, lightly groaned, and said, I only helped you because Tyre and Log have set me up earlier. Don't get any ideas. Han Shuo nodded smilingly and replied, Regardless of that, I owe you a thank you. I don't need your thanks. Wasir departed coldly. Han Shuo gazed at the rapidly diminishing Wasir as he left. He found Wasir to be rather decent in character, or at least he wasn't as scheming as the other sovereigns. Han Shuo took a quick glance at Asura, who was standing beside him, and his thought turned to the sovereign. Although Asura had been very generous to him since he stepped into the fringe, Han Shuo was still constantly on the guard against Asura. Han Shuo felt that Asura was perhaps even more cunning than Tyre. He knew how to subtly manipulate a person into fighting his enemy and had the boldness to gamble with one of his sovereign shops, a sizable chunk of his asset. This sovereign had been using him from the start. He would even increase his investment as Han Shuo's strength grew so that Han Shuo would unwittingly accept him as an ally. Han Shuo dared not place his trust in such a person. He had been on the guard against Asura since day one. If Han Shuo had to select one of the sovereigns as an ally, he would most likely choose Wasir. Wasir wasn't a scheming character. and when he was given respect and favor, he would return them to the person appropriately. Han Shuo thought that such a person would be relatively reliable. Brian, have you figured out a solution to the issue? After the other 3 sovereigns left, Asura looked at Han Shuo smilingly and asked. Han Shuo was jolted from the deep contemplation. He put on a faint smile and replied, "No, I have not, but don't worry about it, I will settle it well." "Of course you will. I have faith in you," Asura said cordially. "I shall return to my underground palace. You may now return to the Omphalos and take over those sovereign shops. I think that after this day, those 3 wouldn't try anything so brazen again, at least temporarily." "Thank you for your assistance," said Han Shuo courteously. Asura nodded and left, leaving Han Shuo alone on the extinct volcano. Han Shuo did not immediately return to the Omphalos. He stood on the volcano and muttered to himself for a while. When he was thinking about leaving, his consciousness sensed something. He turned and stared in a direction puzzlingly. A faint silhouette appeared from the horizon and slowly approached Han Shuo. When the figure got close to the extinct volcano, the puzzled Han Shuo asked, "Why have you returned?" Sovereign Wazir looked around. After making sure that Tyre, Log, and Asura were not there, he stepped out from the shadow, came to Han Shuo, and coldly said, "Tyre and Log have relayed your relationship with Han Hao to the God Hunter Alliance through some secret channels. The leadership in God Hunter Alliance might try to get Han Hao. Tell him to be careful." Wazir paused and hesitated for a moment before he looked intensely at Han Shuo and said, "And beware of Asura." Upon finishing those words, Wazir turned on his heels and started leaving. It was obvious why Wazir chose to return after Asura left to tell Han Shuo those words instead of before Asura left. "Wait!" Han Shuo immediately let out a soft cry when he saw that Wazir was going to leave right away. Wazir stopped. Without turning around, he said in an indifferent voice, "I tell you these because you have spared me just then, but that doesn't mean I want to get associated with you. The God Hunter Alliance is a formidable enemy, and you better pray you don't get killed." Han Shuo put on a smile and said, "Thank you for the warning. I will remember this favor. Right, if there comes a day that I have to fight Tyre and Log, I will appreciate it if you would just stand aside and watch." "If I were you, I'd put off that thought until I've figured out this problem." Wazir coldly groaned and left in an instant. "A worthy friend indeed," muttered Han Shuo softly after Wazir left. "I beware of Asura." I thought Han Shuo as a corner of his lips curved to make a scheming smirk. 3 days later, above a cliff in the northwest of the fringe, Han Hao dismissed his god hunters and waited for Han Shuo's arrival alone. 10 minutes later, an otherworldly radiance streaked through the sky and appeared before Han Hao. "Congratulations, father, you have made yet another breakthrough," said Han Hao in a faint smile. It was vastly different from his usual callous and emotionless demeanor, as though there was a shred of humanity in him. Han Shuo smiled. He sat across Han Hao on a large piece of rock and said, "It's settled. The 10 Omphalos sovereign shops are ours." I knew that father must have handled it like a walk in the park. Han Hao put on an expression as though he knew it all along. After taking a short pause, he asked, "Oh yeah, do we have to return the supplies we looted to those merchants?" "Nope, they did not even mention it. They don't give a damn about those merchants." After staring at the ground silently for a moment, Han Shuo said, "Do not leave the fringe temporarily. I have just received intel that Tyre and Log have revealed our relationship to the God Hunter Alliance, though a certain channel. They might try to do something to you." Upon hearing those words, Han Hao's purple demon eye glistened. He exclaimed, "No wonder." Under Han Shuo's puzzled gaze, Han Hao explained, "A few days ago, I received a message from the God Hunter Alliance asking me to visit the Death Dominion to talk about the Fringe. I find it peculiar that they would suddenly be interested in the Fringe. It turns out that they are having other ideas." "How exactly is the Alliance organized? Who is above you?" asked Han Shuo immediately. His curiosity was aroused. Above the chiefs are hegemons. Each of the 12 dominions has a hegemon. They are the true commanders of the God Hunter Alliance. Every one of them is in the realm of Over-God, just like Sala's. I only know the hegemon who manages the Alliance's operation in the Death Dominion. The rest of them, I have no clue." Han Hao explained everything he knew about the structure of command and strength of the God Hunter Alliance. Back then, when Han Shuo lived in the Darkness Dominion, he had personally met one of the overgods who led the alliance. From the fact that they had committed countless atrocities in every dominion but had yet to be exterminated, Han Shuo expected the alliance to have a number of overgods. But when Han Hao revealed that there were 12 of such existences in the God Hunter alliance, Han Shuo was astounded. Han Shuo thought that no wonder Tyre, Log, Wasir, and Asura were so wary of the God Hunter alliance. When Salas was still around, there were just the 5 overgods in the fringe. They were outnumbered by the God Hunter alliance, who had 12 overgods. So it was that overgod from the Death Dominion who has asked you to travel there? Asked Han Shuo after thinking for a moment. Yes, only he has the qualifications to mobilize me, replied Han Hao as he nodded. Don't go. Leave the God Hunter alliance as soon as possible. That must be planning to do something to you, advised Han Shuo, fearing that something bad might happen to Little Skeleton. Well, I'm not planning on going back. Han Hao wore a calm face as he said, the God Hunter alliance has no strings on me. I have no intention of following their commands after coming to the fringe. To me, only Father and my brothers are important. I answer to no one but to Father. Then I'm at ease, said Han Shuo in a gentle laugh. He thought, indeed, Han Hao is not bound by anyone and would only listen to my command. It turns out that this seemingly challenging problem has never been a problem. /I Chapter 892, House Arrest GDK 892. House Arrest Han Shuo went to the sovereigns and informed them in no uncertain terms that Han Hao would split from the God Hunter alliance, and that if there ever came a day that the fringe was at war with the alliance, Han Hao and his faction would stand against the God Hunter alliance. With that pledge of Han Shuo's, the sovereigns had no more excuses, and they gave Han Shuo what he wanted. Han Shuo had finally gotten control over a piece of the Omphalos. The sovereigns surrendered the sovereign shops previously owned by Salas to Han Shuo. And as one of the managers of the Omphalos, each year, Han Shuo would get 1/5 of all tax income collected in the Omphalos. It was an astronomical amount of black crystal coins. Back when Han Shuo first stepped into the Omphalos, Asura had gifted Han Shuo one of his sovereign shops, which was converted into a celestial pharmacy branch. After taking over Sala's sovereign shops, Han Shuo gave one of those shops to Asura. Han Shuo no longer owed Asura anything of monetary value. Han Shuo was on his toes towards Asura since the beginning, and after having heard Wasir's warning, Han Shuo was even more vigilant towards Asura. Han Shuo tried to not be too closely associated with Asura, so that if he ever had to kill Asura in the future, he wouldn't have any apprehensions or be criticized by the public. Once Han Shuo took control of the 10 sovereign shops, he asked Zavik and Metal Elite Zombie to move into the Omphalos. Metal Elite Zombie had established his Goldstone enterprise in every dominion and had amply demonstrated his talent in managing and growing businesses. Therefore, Han Shuo gave Metal Elite Zombie one of his sovereign shops so that he could set up a Goldstone branch in the Omphalos. Zavik was an intelligent person, and he knew the ins and outs of the fringe. Han Shuo had brought Zavik to the Omphalos to help Metal Elite Zombie in setting up his Goldstone branch. But most importantly, Zavik knew some of the stringers in the Omphalos. Han Shuo gave him a sizable amount of black crystal coins to build his own intelligence network in the fringe. After the meeting on the extinct volcano, the 3 sovereigns had communicated with those Omphalos merchants, instructing them to stop making things difficult for Han Shuo. After having their supplies looted by Han Hao for many months, those Omphalos merchants agreed to the instruction almost immediately. After this ordeal, they all understood just how treacherous Han Shuo was. In addition, those merchants also understood that the sovereigns must have reached some sort of agreement with Han Shuo. They became even more afraid of this mighty character who was rapidly rising in the fringe. Having an infamous reputation was very useful in the fringe. When it came to setting up the Goldstone branch or getting information, things went much smoother when Han Shuo's name was mentioned. 3 months went by in a heartbeat. During that time, Metal Elite Zombie had successfully established a Goldstone branch in the Omphalos. With a seemingly endless budget of black crystal coins and Han Shuo's fearsome reputation, Zavik managed to hire a number of stringers to work for Han Shuo. Although this newly set up intelligence network wasn't as expansive and all-encompassing as those of the other sovereigns, It was better than having nothing. During those months, Han Hao did not continue wreaking havoc all around the fringe. He had been focused on training the god hunters he had recently recruited. Although Han Hao and Han Xiu rarely ever met up, they knew each other's situation well as they had been frequently communicating through their secret channel. One day, while refining new pelleted medicines and scheming to swoop every pharmacist and poison maker of the Omphalos under his sovereignty, he was interrupted by the anxious Zavik rushing into his gymnasium. Han Xiu had instructed Zavik not to disturb him when he was producing medicines or cultivating, unless there was an emergency. Zavik wasn't an incautious person, and he definitely knew how to follow orders. He had never interrupted Han Xiu in his cultivation before, and from that anxious look on his face, Han Xiu knew instantly that there was an urgent situation. "What's happening?" Han Xiu's face turned grave. He had a feeling that something really bad happened. The rather anxious Zavik immediately replied, "I just received news from Han Hao. His follower has just arrived from the Death Dominion with news about the House of Han." Han Xiu's face froze, and he felt even more uneasy. Immediately he asked, "What happened?" Every major god hunter faction in the Ronson Canyon had joined forces to attack the House of Han. Zavik hastily reported everything he knew. From the moment Han Xiu assigned Zavik the task of building an intelligence network, he had instructed Zavik to pay attention to the House of Han in the Darkness Dominion. Having served Han Xiu for some time and being an intelligent man, it was clear to Zavik how much the House of Han meant to Han Xiu. The messenger who had just reported to Han Hao was sent by Kitten before he went to stop the God Hunter factions from attacking the House of Han. This messenger had no clue of their fate. What was told to Han Xiu was just as dire as what the messenger had heard at that time. That follower of Han Hao's took 4 months to travel non-stop from the Death Dominion to the Fringe. This meant that by the time Han Xiu received the information, it had been 4 months since the House of Han was attacked. Han Xiu's face turned dark. From the information, he deduced that the House of Han must have met some sort of calamity in the Darkness Dominion. Otherwise, they wouldn't have tried moving to the Death Dominion. Just like the marathoner, Han Xiu had no idea what the House of Han's current situation was like, or if they had managed to pass through the Ronson Canyon. Based on the information currently at hand, Zavik felt that it was likely the House of Han had perished in the Ronson Canyon. However, he remained silent and kept that prediction to himself. After thinking for a moment, Han Xiu took a deep breath and said to Zavik, "I need to leave the Fringe for a while. Keep it a secret. If anyone asks, just tell them that I'm cultivating in the Pandemonium. It won't be long before I return. You will be in charge while I'm away." "Don't worry, my lord. No one would know that you have left the Fringe," replied Zavik as he nodded. Han Xiu then said, "I'm leaving right now. Keep an eye on those little guys and make sure that they are not stirring up trouble. I will return as soon as possible." After leaving some instructions to Zavik, Han Xiu openly walked out of the Celestial Pearl like everything was normal. But as soon as he was outside the Omphalos, he concealed his aura and contacted Han Hao. After secretly meeting Han Hao to have a short discussion, Han Xiu left the Fringe. The Death Dominion, Witherbone City. Of all the cities in the Death Dominion, and perhaps on Elysium, the structures in Witherbone City were the most peculiar. The city wall was made using the bones of an unknown magical beast. The bones were of various colors and were incredibly tough. It gave the city a terrifying, sinister appearance. The members of the House of Han were gathered inside a structure in the Chiron residence made of white bones. The sanitary conditions and amenities of this building were far poorer than what they had in the City of Shadows. But the most unbearable thing was that the building was located beside a stinking, revolting bone refinery. A bone refinery was a facility where bones were processed using unique minerals and metals. By subjecting the bones to certain processes, they could be transformed into a material even tougher than rocks. The processed bones could be used for building durable structures, and some could even be used as the foundational material of divine weapons. Most of the bones were those of magical beasts, and some belonged to perished gods. They came to the refinery raw with rotting flesh still loosely attached. It left an unbearable stench on the place. The House of Han was placed in a house located nearby the bone refinery. They had lived in the Witherbone city of the Death Dominion for a while. The days of living by relying on someone else's charity had not been pleasant. Although the members of the House of Chiron were very cordial towards the House of Han at first, when they discovered that the House of Han wouldn't compromise on a certain issue, they became not so cordial. The House of Han did not lack black crystal coins. They could easily afford to rent a better residence or even buy an upscale property in the city to live in. However, Sha Tio, the patriarch of the House of Chiron, gave all kinds of excuses to keep the Han family from leaving the Chiron residence. Li Wei, who was a close friend of Han Shuo, had protested the treatment of the Han family. But unfortunately, Li Wei wasn't influential in her House of Chiron, and Sha Tio turned a deaf ear to her comments. Phoebe, Emily, and the others who were clean freaks were nearly driven mad after having to endure the rotting stench of the bone refinery for months. The members of the House of Han grew more and more annoyed after their requests were repeatedly rejected. However, the House of Chiron was extremely mighty. They were one of the strongest family clans in Witherbone City. It also seemed as though they had some sort of agreement with the city lord to prevent the House of Han from leaving the city. I can't believe that we escaped from one danger just to walk into another one. The House of Chiron is not just placing us on house arrest, they are torturing us, said Phoebe angrily. There's nothing we can do but to swallow this. Witherbone City is much stronger than the City of Shadows. There are divine guards stationed all around the Chiron residence at all times. It is impossible for us to force our way out the city, said Stratham after he let out a sigh. He thought that they were out of danger after stepping into the Death Dominion, but they only landed themselves in greater danger. They want Brian's medicine formulas and our training methods. These are the cornerstones of our House of Han. We would have no place on Elysium without them. I will not reveal a thing to them. I will carry them to my grave if I have to, said Phoebe resolutely. After having stayed in the residence for so long, it was obvious to Phoebe what the House of Chiron wanted. Chapter 893, by time GDK 893. By time Witherbone City, the City Lord's mansion. Hill, the City Lord, Sha Tio, the patriarch of the House of Chiron, and the patriarchs of all major family clans in the city gathered in the mansion. Hill sat on his throne made of white bones, positioned higher than every other seat in the chamber. His brows were bunched in annoyance as he asked, "Haven't you made any progress?" As the City Lord of Witherbone City, Hill cultivated in the energy of death and possessed late-stage high god strength. A few hundred years earlier, the Death Over God bestowed upon him a divine brand. Thanks to the brand left in his soul, Hill was likely going to make a breakthrough in a short time and reach the realm of Overgod. Although he would never have the quintessence that the Death Over God possessed, reaching the Overgod realm was still an incredible feat. There were no more than tens of Overgod beings in all of Elysium. Hill had been assiduously cultivating and worked very hard to manage the Witherbone City for the Death Overgod, just for a chance to earn the divine brand, which would increase his chances of advancing to the realm of Overgod. Hill was ambitious and greedy. The moment he heard about the miracles of the House of Han's medicines and the amazing team coordination of their divine guards from Sha Tio, he was tempted. Just like Hill, Sha Tio was no benevolent character. The two came to an agreement in no time, and their scheme was set in motion the moment the House of Han stepped into the Death Dominion. Sha Tio and Hill's divine guards were incredibly courteous and cordial when they escorted the House of Han to Witherbone City. But as soon as they stepped into the Chiron residence, Sha Tio started trying to get those secrets from the House of Han. And when he discovered that the Han family wouldn't divulge a word, he immediately instructed divine guards to be stationed all around the Chiron residence, preventing them from leaving the city. Sha Tio shook his head as though he was out of moves. He replied, "It doesn't matter what I offer. They are unwilling to sell that information. No matter the medicine formulas or their training method, they won't divulge a thing." The House of Han no longer has any footing in the City of Shadows. Although their Celestial Pearl Pharmacy has branches in many cities, they do not possess the power to protect their assets. And that Brian, nobody knows if he is even still alive. The fuck are they being so stubborn for? They think that they still have a way out of this, said Bandfather disdainfully. He was a patriarch of one of the major family clans in Witherbone City. I have no idea what the hell they are clinging onto. Shatio put on a sorrowful face and said, "We haven't been subtle in our actions, and it should be obvious to them what we are after. They should also know that we will not let them off if we don't get what we want. Why wouldn't they just yield? Those family clans that have business relations with the House of Han keep sending representatives over, claiming that they wish to talk business with the House of Han. But the real reason they are here should be the same as ours." Hill bunched his brows and instructed Shatio, "Speed up the process. We won't be able to hide the fact for much longer. Those family clans won't be easy to deal with. They might come to visit Witherbone City in person. It will be troublesome if they find out what we are doing. Give me another month. If the House of Han remains so stubborn after 1 month, then I'll stop being so polite with them." Shatio also knew that he could not drag the matter for too long. He had to extract the information he wanted as soon as possible, lest all the thoughts and efforts they had put in be for naught. Yes, get it out of them as soon as possible. Hill wore a cold smile as he said, "If they still don't comply with our demands by then, we will kill them all. We are cultivators of the energy of death. We have a greater understanding of the soul than the average person. If we can't get it from their mouths, we will extract those secrets from their souls. That should only be done as the last resort. If we do that and it is leaked to the public, those family clans might form an alliance to crusade against us. And needless to say, our reputations and interests will be greatly affected. If it is still possible, we should make the House of Han voluntarily share those secrets with us," said Banfather. Shatio nodded and replied, "I will try all the softer measures first. But if those don't work, then I will use the hard one." Shatio wore a chilling face as he said, "Those two great secrets of the House of Han are worth the risk." "All right, then it is decided. You will have another month. After that, if you don't kill them, I will send my men to finish them. By hook or by crook, those two secrets will belong to our Witherbone City." Hill then gestured and said, "That's all for today. You are all dismissed. Shatio, pump up the pressure." Shatio got up from his seat, bowed at the city lord, and returned to his Kyron residence. Dagacy walked to the structure beside the Stinking Bone Refinery. The ancient lizard king wore a helpless, miserable face and sighed as he walked. When he reached the structure, he did not know how to begin a conversation with those inside. Just like the members of the House of Han, Dagacy originated from profound continent. Needless to say, he was disturbed and saddened by how the Han family was treated by the House of Kyron. However, as Dagacy was just a tiny little divine guard, he had no influence on any matter at all. Shatio made Dagacy the mediator because he knew many members of the Han family. Stratham and Iremike were acquainted with Dagacy back when they were still on profound continent. During their time in the Kyron residence, they had heard bad news innumerable from Dagacy. Although the two were angry at the House of Kyron, they held no grudges against Dagacy. Stratham forced a smile when he saw the despondent Dagacy. He faked a laugh and asked snidely, "I suppose you have more news for us today?" Stratham understood that Dagacy must be bringing bad news once more. He behaved that way so that Dagacy wouldn't be so miserable. "Sigh, I really do not wish to see you here, at least not this way." Dagacy lamented, "Back in the City of Shadows, you guys and Brian had treated me very well in the Han residence. But now that you guys are in the Kyron residence, not only have I been unable to give you the same treatment, but I have to let you suffer such humiliation." Sigh. "If I were stronger, perhaps they would listen to me." "It has nothing to do with you. Li Wei can be considered a little princess in the House of Kyron, and yet her words are ignored just the same. Shatio has been blinded by greed, and he will not listen to anyone's advice. You have nothing to blame yourself for." After taking a short pause, Iremike asked, "So, what is it that you want to tell us?" "Certain people deliberately allow me to overhear their conversation. Hill and my patriarch had a meeting today, and he is giving my patriarch a deadline. If he still cannot get the information from you after a month, Hill will kill you and extract the information from your soul," revealed Dagacy. "We will fight them," Gilbert angrily shouted. "What a bunch of despicable twats. I have never met anyone more shameless than them. When we cooperated before to build a Celestial Pearl branch in Witherbone City, they treated us so cordially. And after making a shit ton of crystal coins from our Celestial Pearl, this is how they are treating us. They are even more disgusting than Wallace. If they won't let us live, Then we will attack them," said Sanguis with his eyes glowing red. During those months of staying in the Chiron residence, Sanguis had been bottling his anger and hatred. He was getting the impulse to recklessly destroy everything. Sanguis was also aware that once they struck, the House of Han would be dead. Although the House of Han guards were powerful, they were heavily outnumbered by the divine guards of Witherbone City. The House of Han was facing an even greater threat here in Witherbone City than before. In the City of Shadows, Wallace would only get someone else to do his dirty work, but not openly attack the House of Han himself, because he was somewhat scared of Han Shuo, or more specifically, his connection with the goddess of destiny. But here in Witherbone City, Hill and Sha Tio did not consider the young Han Shuo as any threat. In their minds, Han Shuo was nothing more than a genius pharmacist. They were clueless about Han Shuo's association with the goddess of destiny's daughter. Therefore, they had no qualms about exterminating the House of Han. If we sneak up on them, we can kill at least a few hundred of the House of Chiron's divine guards. But of course, we will end up dead. We should start discussing how to kill as many of the Chiron family as possible. Even if we are to die, we shall make our death worthwhile, said Ballins calmly. Ballins knew the situation they were in and that there was no hope of escaping from the Chiron residence. The way he saw it, causing the greatest damage to the House of Chiron was the only thing they could do. "No," cried Emily. She explained, "Brian will definitely not want anything to happen to us. We cannot be so rash." "Then what should we do?" Gilbert grumbled. "We have no way out and we are dead no matter what we do. The least we could do is make them suffer some losses." "Ballins, Sanguis, Gilbert, you three know Brian's demonic combat formation the best. Produce a set of instructions of one of the formations," instructed Emily reluctantly. "Why, what's the point?" Sanguis shouted. "They will never let us off. Even if we give them everything, they will still lock us up here. Dagassi, did you help us deliver the information?" Emily asked Dagassi without replying to Sanguis' complaint. "I have used up all of the 1,000,000 black crystal coins you handed me. If he is still alive, he will receive the information sooner or later." Dagassi forced a smile and said, "Hill and Sha Tio did not consider Brian as a threat. They did not limit my activity at all." Emily nodded and let out a short sigh of relief. She proposed to the party, "Let's try to buy as much time as we can. I only hope that Brian will find us before it's too late." Chapter 894, The City of Wraiths, GDK 894. The City of Wraiths, Han Shu rushed towards the Death Dominion at his maximum speed. After entering the Skybreak realm, it seemed as though his body no longer felt any effects of Elysium's gravity. He could travel more than 1,000,000 miles per day. He was flying faster than what an average being could even imagine. That godhunter of Han Hao's took almost 4 months to reach the fringe from the Death Dominion. But Han Shuo, by pushing himself to his limit, took just 7 days to reach the Death Dominion. After 7 days of marathoning at his top speed, Han Shuo had exhausted plenty of his energy. He decided to enter the nearest city, the City of Wraiths. Other than to rest and recharge some of the energy consumed, he wanted to find out the House of Han's current situation. Han Shuo knew that the House of Han had traveled hundreds of thousands of miles from Fort Lasberg to seek refuge in the Death Dominion. The Ronson Canyon bordered the Death Dominion. If the House of Han escaped from the godhunters of the Ronson Canyon, they should be somewhere in the territory of the Death Dominion. Han Shuo did not know if his family clan members managed to escape from Ronson Canyon, but he held some hope. He knew that the first thing he had to do was to find out if they had stepped into the Death Dominion. Han Shuo took half a day to pass through the outer villages and towns. He was standing before the City of Wraiths city gate by nightfall. As one of the 6 main cities of the Death Dominion, the City of Wraiths had its own distinguishing architectural style and characteristics. The most notable feature was the wraiths that filled the city. The city lord of the City of Wraiths, Talbot, was a master at controlling wraiths. His hobby was to collect the souls of every living being and imprisoning them inside energy towers. He would twist those souls using a mysterious energy or seal them in the city wall directly. Although those wraiths were weak, they could monitor every corner of the city for him. Talbot, the city lord, would very quickly be informed by his wraiths if there were any disturbances in his city. He would also be instantly notified if enemies tried to invade the city, allowing him to respond to the threats very quickly. Han Shu couldn't help but bunch his brows disdainfully after sensing those weak life forms poorly concealed in the city wall and energy towers of the city of Wraiths. The Wraiths may have seemed to be parallels of Han Shuo's demon generals. However, Han Shuo knew that even the strongest of these Wraiths were nothing compared to his weakest demon general. They were just eyes that Talbot placed in every corner of the city, which could be easily detected by anyone. The offensive capability of a Wraith was so minute that it couldn't even threaten a base god. Even if Han Shuo were to stand still and allow thousands upon thousands of Wraiths to swarm at him, he still wouldn't sustain the slightest injury. Those Wraiths had near non-existent offensive capabilities, immobile as they were sealed inside walls, and most certainly could not continually evolve stronger. No matter the aspect, this life form was light years inferior to Han Shuo's demon generals. That was why Han Shuo scorned after sensing the life form attached to the walls. In every city, there were merchants who traded not goods but information. The city of Wraiths was no exception. Where there were consumers, there would be sellers. Read more chapter on. Calm in the western region of the city of Wraiths. Many non-local gods stayed in this area. There were all kinds of goods for sale. And naturally, information was up for sale as well. An information brokerage firm was a store that collected and sold information. With enough black crystal coins, one could obtain nearly any information that one desired. Even if they did not have the information that one sought, one would need only pay a reasonable amount of black crystal coins as deposit, and the firm would send their investigators to obtain the information desired. Information brokerage firms were typically quiet and empty on usual days. But if something major happened in any of the dominions, these firms would be crowded with customers. Many of the major family clans who did not have reliable intelligence networks in other dominions would patronize such a firm. Han Shuo entered one of the information brokerage firms. Immediately, he saw an old woman with drooping eye bags sitting in a dark corner. Her eyes were closed, but she was not asleep. With just one glance, Han Shuo determined that she was a mid-stage low god of death. Han Shuo surveyed the brokerage firm with his consciousness and discovered that no one was on the premises other than the old woman. After calming his mind, Han Shuo made a beeline for the old woman. He tossed out a sack containing 10,000 black crystal coins on the wooden table before her. A loud clinking noise broke the silence. "I want to know about the city of Shadow's House of Han. If you have information about their well-being, this bag of black crystal coins is yours," said Han Shuo. He was feeling somewhat nervous to find out the truth, afraid that they had all been killed in the Ronson Canyon. The sharp sound of crystal coins bumping against each other instantly roused the old woman who was resting in her seat. She opened her eerie green eyes like a hungry beast that scented its feast. Without saying a word, she placed a hand on the sack of black crystal coins, grasping, feeling it with her greedy hand. She nodded, as though having confirmed that the black crystal coins were not counterfeits. Then she started sizing up Han Shuo with squinted eyes. The light in her eerie green eyes glowed brighter and brighter. She had a strange expression on her wrinkled face. She seemed puzzled, but at the same time, unperplexed. After staring at Han Shuo for a long, long while, she took a light breath and in a slow, deep voice asked, "Why would you be interested in the House of Han?" "Hee. There are quite a lot who are interested in them recently." Han Shuo was a little stunned. He replied in an annoyed manner, "Cut the crap. I gave you my money, now give me my information." Normally, an information broker would ask nothing about the buyer's identity and origins. It was taboo. In her line of work, the old woman's actions could be deemed unprofessional. "Do you know how many variations there are in the 8 Desolation and Torment formation?" The old woman suddenly asked as she looked at Han Shuo. Han Shuo's face instantly jolted and his eyes opened wide. His right hand moved forward, clutched at the old woman's neck, and raised her to the air in one fell swoop. Han Shuo's face went dark and chilling as he shouted, "Who are you? How did you know about this?" Simultaneously, the wide-open doors and all the windows shut themselves in a loud bam. A bizarre, obstructive energy instantly filled the information brokerage firm, preventing those outside from knowing what was happening inside the building. The old woman's face quickly turned purple. She tried kicking and punching Han Shuo to free herself, but that only made things worse for her as the Omen's invincible body automatically rebutted. Soon, she had no strength left. Her green eyes started rolling up, and it seemed as though she would die at any moment. Han Shuo then flung the old woman away. She was pressed against the wall by an invisible energy. Although she could breathe heavily, she could not move. "Speak, how do you know about the 8 Desolation and Torment Formation?" asked Han Shuo, who was standing 5 meters from the old woman. With one thought, a demonic blade glistening with chilling lights shot out from his right index finger. Han Shuo could not appear more threatening. The old woman heavily gasped and coughed for a while before she could speak. Looking at the murderous Han Shuo and knowing just how helpless she was, the old woman couldn't help herself but shrieked in panic. "I have no idea what the 8 torment formations is. Someone came to our agency and gave us a large amount of black crystal coins and asked us to relay some words. Speak clearly or I will skin you alive," threatened Han Shuo. "Every information broker is instructed so. If anyone comes asking about the City of Shadows House of Han, we will ask the person if they know how many variations there are in the 8 Desolation and Torment Formation. If the person could answer it correctly, we would give the person some information," replied the terrified old woman hastily. "There are many who asked about the House of Han's situation. I have asked all of them that question, but none of them knew what it was. You are the only person who reacted so violently. It seems that you are the person we have been waiting for." The energy that restrained her body abruptly vanished and she fell to the ground. Immediately, she knew that her life was no longer in danger. "There are 18 variations." Han Shuo opened his palm and the old woman was pulled back to her seat. Han Shuo wore a dark face as he instructed. "Speak, tell me everything I should know." "So it is you." The old woman nodded as she massaged her neck that was nearly snapped. She forced a smile and said, "Someone gave our agency a large sum of money. They want you to know the House of Han is currently at Witherbone City, and they are in a bad situation. They ask that you look for them at the Chiron residence with haste." "Anything else?" Han Shuo inwardly heaved a sigh of relief after hearing that the House of Han was not exterminated in the Ronson Canyon. His face calmed and his voice grew less threatening. "No, that is all. They want you to look for them at the Chiron residence in Witherbone City as soon as possible," replied the old woman as she looked at Han Shuo. She pushed the sack of black crystal coins towards Han Shuo and said, "This information is free. You may take your crystal coins back." "I apologize for my actions. You can keep the crystal coins. Consider it as compensation," said Han Shuo after forcing a smile. Han Shuo no longer felt so restless after knowing that the House of Han was fine. He immediately left the firm and went in the direction of Witherbone City. "Goddammit, he almost killed me," said the old woman after Han Shuo vanished. She put on a dark face and thought for a moment. Then, as though she had recalled something, she hastily went to a room in the back of the building and fiddled with a magical mirror that every information brokerage firm was entrusted with. After punching a string of integers into the magical mirror, the impatient face of a young man gradually appeared on the smooth and flat device. The young man took a glance at the old woman before he arrogantly asked, "What's the matter?" "Young Master Portlam, I hear that you have been looking for Brian of the House of Han. Are you still interested in his whereabouts?" asked the old woman humbly in a flattering smile. The House of Batchelder was one of the top family clans in the city of Wraiths. Portlam, as a young master of the house, was famous in the city for having reached highgoodhood at his young age. After having been injured by Han Shuo, Portlam thought of revenge every minute of his life. But unfortunately for Portlam, Han Shuo had always stayed in the Darkness Dominion's City of Shadows, out of Portlam's reach. And after news got out that Han Shuo had left the City of Shadows, Portlam had contacted his local information brokerage firms, asking for Han Shuo's whereabouts. However, after leaving the City of Shadows, Han Shuo had avoided populated areas and remained rather stealthy. Therefore, the firms were unable to get Han Shuo's precise location. Back then, this old woman had reported to Portlam when Han Shuo was sighted in Ethereal City. However, as Ethereal City was just too far from the City of Wraiths, Portlam had no choice but to further postpone his quest for vengeance. And after Han Shuo stepped into the fringe, These information brokerage firms lost track of Han Shuo as their intelligence network did not cover the fringe. Although it had been many years, Portlam's hatred for Han Shuo did not subside with time. He was still interested in Han Shuo's whereabouts, and he hastily asked, "Where was that guy last seen? If he is not too far from the city of Wraiths, I will make him pay the price for injuring me, the mighty Portlam." Not far at all. The old woman smiled and said, "He just left from my place, and he should still be inside the city. Your bachelor residence is near the city gate he will leave from. If you get ready right now, you should be able to intercept him before he leaves the city." Portlet cackled sinisterly. Through the magical mirror, he replied, "If your information proves reliable, I will pay you 100,000 black crystal coins. All right, I will get ready right away." Portlam disconnected the call upon finishing those words. Portlam's image faded, and the magical mirror gradually returned to normal. The old woman let out an evil laugh and said to herself, "Youngster, I have told you the information that you should know, as I'm obliged to. As for revealing your whereabouts to Portlam, that's my business with Portlam. This is in line with my profession's rules of conduct." Han Shuo's mind was finally relaxed after knowing that his family clan had not perished in the Ronson Canyon. For the time being, he did not know the humiliation and treatment his family clan members received in Witherbone City. To him, all that mattered was that they were still alive. Although Han Shuo was at ease, he did not slow down his pace. Soon after entering the city of Wraiths, he planned to leave the city through another city gate. Han Shuo dared not fly at his shockingly great top speed inside the city of Wraiths. There were wraiths in every inch of the city and countless divine guards patrolling. If Han Shuo was to recklessly zoom across the streets at his insane speed, he could invite unwanted attention, especially from the patrolling divine guards. Therefore, Han Shuo had only been flying at a speed slightly greater than the crowd as he approached the city gate in the direction of Witherbone City. When he almost arrived at the gate, his consciousness suddenly detected that for some reason, many experts and divine guards were gathering in that region. Han Shuo did not release demon generals to probe ahead. He thought that no matter what was happening there, it shouldn't have anything to do with him. As the city gate was the closest to Witherbone City, Han Shuo did not change his course. He reached the city gate after 10 minutes. The great city wall entered his sight. He saw large groups of divine guards carrying a unique emblem of a family clan, and barring the city gate was a young, arrogant-looking man. To Han Shuo's surprise, it was Portlam. Upon seeing the expressions on those divine guards and that there were 2 high gods from the House of Bachelder, Han Shuo took no time to realize that he was their target. And without thinking, Han Shuo figured out that it must be that old woman from that information brokerage firm who had revealed his whereabouts. While inside the firm, Han Shuo had shut every door and window and even released an energy that obstructed prying ears. Even Talbot, the city lord who had wraiths all around the city, wouldn't be able to find out what happened in the firm. Moreover, Talbot should not know of Han Shuo's identity or that he had grudges with Portlam. That old woman must have made out his identity from his reaction and the question he asked. If I had known earlier, I would have finished that bitch. I thought Han Shuo a little regretfully. However, he did not evade Portlam, but continued flying towards the city gate. Given Han Shuo's current strength, no expert in the city of Wraiths had the power to stop him. That feeble little Portlam would pose Han Shuo as much obstruction as a piece of paper. Even if Talbot and the patriarch of the Bachelder family were there, Han Shuo was confident that he could slaughter them without much trouble. "Hey Brian, long time no see. I heard that your House of Han got kicked out of the City of Shadows. Back then, I couldn't touch you because Wallace was there to protect you. But what a surprise, you would step into the City of Wraiths to your doom. Too tired of living, I suppose?" Portlam had been waiting for this moment for decades. He remembered being chased around by Han Shuo in the Celestial Pearls banquet hall. If Charlotte had not stepped in, he might have died to Han Shuo in the City of Shadows. Han Shuo was in a hurry and had no time to prattle with Portlam. He impatiently shouted, "Portlam, to be honest, I have forgotten about you long ago. But since you insist on seeking death, death you will get." Chapter 895, Leaving the City of Wraiths, Chapter 895. Leaving the City of Wraiths, ha ha ha. Portlam laughed out loud. obviously not taking Han Xiu's threat seriously. "You seem to have forgotten that you are in the city of wraiths, my territory. No one is going to step up for you," said Portlam arrogantly. The House of Batchelder was very influential in the city of wraiths, and Portlam was the favored young master in the house. Given that the House of Han had recently lost their footing in the City of Shadows, Portlam thought that he was invincible. He knew that no one would make a sound if he murdered Han Xiu right there. "Young master, let us handle this brassy guy," said one of the high gods standing beside Portlam after he took a step forward. He cultivated the energy of Earth and possessed early-stage high god strength. He had a Herculean physique and appeared strong. "Young master, we can take care of him for you. He wouldn't be able to escape," said another high god, who cultivated the energy of wind. The two high gods stood readily on both sides of Portlam. They were ready to charge at Han Xiu at Portlam's command. As the most promising young blood of the House of Batchelder, Portlam had a bright future ahead of him. Some of those House of Batchelder high gods had long been treating Portlam as their future patriarch. They would seize every opportunity to win Portlam's favor. Han Xiu was between laughter and tears when he saw there were just two early-stage high gods approaching him. At the time Han Xiu dealt a blow on Portlam, they indeed possessed similar strengths. But now, after so many years had passed, Han Xiu's strength had soared to the point that he could defeat over-god existences without too much trouble. Two early-stage high gods were no threat at all. "Portlam, oh, Portlam, it seems that you have stayed inside the Death Dominion for too long, so much so that you have lost touch with reality," said Han Xiu with a ridiculing smile. Han Xiu had fought Ralph and Ayabashi in the City of Shadows and defeated them. Han Xiu thought that Portlam probably had not been paying too much attention to news about him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought just two high gods. But Han Xiu was wrong. Portlam had heard of that news from the City of Shadows. He just didn't believe them. "Hee, you are talking about defeating Ayabashi, right? Brian, only those who have never fought you would believe that you could defeat Ayabashi. I have left the City of Shadows for just a few decades. Your strength couldn't have improved so rapidly. Haha, I know that you and Wallace had been playing an act so that you can take the position as the chief of Fifth Corps. You think I couldn't figure out something as plain as that?" Obviously, Portlam did not believe these so-called news originating in the City of Shadows. It wasn't completely unreasonable for Portlam to think so. On Elysium, even the most talented expert would need a few hundred years to reach mid-stage high godhood from early-stage high godhood. He thought that Wallace and Han Xiu had conspired and faked that news. Han Xiu couldn't help himself but laughed while shaking his head. Then, without saying another word, he started walking towards the city gate calmly. Han Xiu had not batted the two threatening high gods an eye. He acted as though they weren't even there. The arrogant and cocky attitude of Han Xiu had infuriated the two early-stage high gods. They did not wait for Portlam to give the command, but simultaneously charged at Han Xiu with great rapport. It took them just an instant to deploy their domains of divinity, gather the elements of earth and wind, and launch their attacks. They thrust an earth spear and a wind scimitar filled with the divine energies of earth and wind towards Han Xiu's chest. I clang, /I when the earth spear and wind scimitar made contact with Han Xiu's chest, they did not melt through his flesh and bones like the two expected. Instead, it seemed as though their divine weapons had struck on extremely hard rock. Loud metallic clangs were heard and they were stopped. In the next instance, two bursts of violent power flowed through the divine weapons, shattering it before entering the two high gods. The violent counterattacking power had caught them off guard. They had been stunned and were sent flying backward. Then, with a quick gesture, an invisible energy was injected into the shattered pieces of earth spear and wind scimitar. The broken pieces of weapons seemed as though they had become alive. They shot towards the two high gods at an even greater speed. /I all of the shards entered the bodies of the two high gods. However, they did not immediately die and not a drop of blood had left their body. Those shards, maneuvered by an incorporeal energy, were as though hundreds of small scissors, making crunching noises from within their bodies. It was as though the two high gods were being blended from the inside. They shrieked and cried with absolute horror and misery. I splat, /I finally, they exploded. Their minced internal organs splattered all around and loud, wild shrieks suddenly turned into silence. Then, Han Shuo exhaled a puff of gray air. The grayish ball of air hovered to their skulls and gently brought their divine souls to Han Shuo. After advancing to the Skybreak realm, Han Shuo had become profoundly masterful in the manipulation of energy, so much so that he could even perform surgical operations to the cellular level using demonic yuan. Manipulating soul energy could not be easier for Han Shuo. In just moments, two high gods filled with energy were transformed into puddles of blood in the most horrifying and agonizing way possible. Their shrieks of helplessness and misery continued to echo in the ears of the remaining house of Bachelder divine guards. Suddenly, a divine guard on the city gate took a step backward and announced, "This is a quarrel between the two of you. We have nothing to do with it." Then, he immediately turned to his subordinates and instructed, "Open the gates." The divine guard worked for Talbot the city lord. As he was not aware of Han Shuo's strength, he accepted Portlam's request to seal the city gate to prevent Han Shuo from escaping. But after seeing just how easily Han Shuo slaughtered two high gods, he immediately realized just how foolish he had been. He immediately switched sides to avoid conflict with Han Shuo. But Han Shuo did not even pay any attention to the divine guard. He was just too insignificant to him. Han Shuo put on a faintly mocking smile as he looked at the flabbergasted Portlam. He shook his head and sighed, "Hoo-hoo, how pitiful of you, Portlam. You'd rather believe in a conspiracy and make such a feeble attempt to kill me. Pathetic." Portlam had been totally stupefied. He saw two mighty high god experts slaughtered by Han Shuo just like that. There wasn't even an actual fight. From start to finish, Han Shuo seemed as though he had barely exerted any strength, as though killing two high gods was as easy as killing two ants. It was evident to Portlam that Han Shuo's strength was more than a level greater than those high gods. Perhaps only a late-stage high god expert like his father could do so without breaking a sweat. So, it wasn't a hoax, muttered the ashen Portlam. This so-called prodigy of the House of Bachelder suddenly realized just how insignificant he was compared to Han Shuo. You know, sometimes in life, you just gotta accept your fate. The smiling Han Shuo walked to Portlam relaxedly and whacked him with his bare palm. A tremendous force, as though a mountain with the density of a neutron star, crushed on Portlam. His neck, spine, and legs went bent to unnatural forms before his body exploded with a bang. Han Shuo had never been merciful to his enemies. Portlam had sealed his destiny ever since he tried to lay his finger on Phoebe, Emily, and the others. Even if Portlam had not shown up on that day, Han Shuo would have sent someone to get rid of him when Portlam came back to his mind. Han Shuo understood that if a character like Portlam was to be spared his life, it will only be a matter of time before they harm the House of Han. Although Han Shuo was not afraid of being attacked himself, he did not want any possibility of his family clan members coming under threat. After collecting Portlam's divine soul, Han Shuo scanned those House of Bachelder divine guards with his eyes and calmly said, "You should all know who I am. He, tell your patriarch that I'm going to Witherbone City. He can find me there if he wants revenge." Those House of Bachelder divine guards immediately pulled a distance from Han Shuo, as though afraid that Han Shuo might kill them. The city gate ahead of Han Shuo was being hastily opened by the divine guards in charge. They tactfully cleared the path and watched as Han Shuo walked out of the city swaggeringly. Chapter 896, Composure. Chapter 896, Composure in Witherbone City, the Chiron residence. Inside a grandiose and lavishly decorated meeting room, the patriarch of the House of Chiron was wearing a faint smile as he read a scroll handed to him by Emily. Standing beside Emily was Bollins and Strathome. Others, especially Sanguis, Bollins, and Phoebe, who tended to be impulsive, were not allowed to join the meeting lest they bring calamity to the House of Han. On that day, Emily handed the scroll describing one of the demonic combat formations that Bollins, Sanguis, and Gilbert had documented to Shatio. After hearing those words relayed by Dagassi, Emily and the others knew that if they continued to keep their lips tightly shut, Shatio and those treacherous leaders of Witherbone City might run out of patience and exterminate their family clan, extracting the secrets they wanted from their souls. Hoping to stay alive for as long as possible, Emily agreed to their demand, but handed them just one of the demonic combat formation training methods. After having waited for so long and pressuring the House of Han with all kinds of methods, Sha-Tio finally got the scroll he wanted. Needless to say, he felt pretty delighted. However, as Sha-Tio carefully read the scroll, that smile on his face gradually turned dark, and when he finished it, he angrily flung the scroll. I it was propelled by a forceful energy and slapped loudly on Balin's cheek. You trying to make a fool out of me with these stupid scribblings? How in the world can they be better at team combat just by dancing around in those nonsensical steps? Ridiculous. Sha-Tio wore a dark face as he glared at the three members of the House of Han. He took a deep breath and coldly groaned, "My House of Chiron has demonstrated our good faith. Not only are we housing your Han family in our residence, but we are also giving you millions of black crystal coins. But all we get in return is this bullshit." It was obvious that Sha-Tio had deliberately slapped Balins with the scroll to humiliate Balins and the House of Han. Sha-Tio was annoyed at Balins from the moment they met, especially by the faint killing intent Balins released. Unlike Emily and Stratham, Balins was not respectful to Sha-Tio, but was rather rude and indifferent. All he could do in his rage was try to get a reaction out of Balins. Any ordinary person who had been insulted by Sha-Tio in that manner would most likely have lost their composure and started an all-out brawl. But Balins did not react as Sha-Tio had expected. In fact, he did not react at all. There wasn't a trace of anger, sadness, or humiliation on his face. He stayed calm and indifferent as though Sha-Tio had not slapped him. He was like a monk who felt absolutely nothing. Balins reached for the scroll, then, in a calm, indifferent voice, he explained, "The set of steps and positions recorded on this scroll is genuine. It is the method we use for training our House of Han guards. To prove that this is not a fake, you can simply ask 3 of your House of Chiron guards to practice the technique and test them against 3 others." Emily and Stratham inwardly let out a sigh of relief. They knew that Balins was a monster who could be even more savage than Sanguis and Gilbert when he was killing. They were really afraid that after being insulted by Sha-Tio, Balins might lose his composure and go all out against Sha-Tio. They also knew that perhaps it was Shada's intention to provoke Balins into attacking him and end up dead. Inside the meeting room, other than Sha-Tio, the Chiron family patriarch, there were also 5 high gods of the Chiron family. They stood in a row and were all staring at Balins, ready to kill the instant he snapped. Sha-Tio appeared as though he did not expect Balins could keep his composure so well. He hesitated for a moment before he beckoned and impatiently said, "You 3 are dismissed. Leave the scroll here. I will put the technique to the test with a few of my divine guards. If I find out that they have no effect on team combat strength, you guys are gonna get it." Stratham and Emily exchanged glances, respectfully said goodbye to Sha-Tio, and left the meeting room with Balins. "My patriarch, the self-restraint possessed by that fella is truly frightening. I have been carefully observing. He showed not even the slightest anger from start to finish. A person who possesses such great control over their own emotions will eventually become a formidable character. He will be a tremendous threat to us," remarked one of the high gods after those of the Han family left. "A character like him who can remain so calm to such an insult is either a fool or a most formidable enemy. Patriarch, he must not be allowed to live," advised another high god. Those high gods of the Chiron family felt greatly threatened by Balins. They were not afraid of Balin's current strength, but were afraid of the patience he demonstrated, as they themselves were unable to remain so calm and indifferent to such humiliation and insult. They felt that allowing Balins to live would be no different from sleeping in a bed with a viper underneath it. Sha-Tio was no fool, and he too could tell how much of a threat Balins could be. He growled, "Of course I know that." But he stayed composed no matter what I threw at him. "I need no excuse to kill him now. We need to check if the scroll they gave us is actually useful. But in any case, they are firmly trapped in our Chiron residence. We will just kill them after they give us all their secrets." "Patriarch, why bother asking them for the secrets? Isn't it easier to just kill them all and extract the memories from their souls?" asked one of the puzzled high gods. Sha-Tio explained, "It's easier said than done. Memory extraction not only consumes a great amount of the reader's divine energy, but there is also no guarantee that the victim's memories will be fully extracted. The reader will also have to act quickly, as the moment that a person dies, his memories will start dissipating with his soul. The reader could end up getting just random pieces of information that can't be used. After all, the soul is the most complex and mysterious thing in the world. No one has ever come close to fully understanding it. Then, Shatio gestured and instructed, "Take the scroll, get a few of the guards to practice the technique. I want to know the results as soon as possible." "Understood, Patriarch," the high gods replied in one voice, bowed, and left. Strathome, Emily, and Bollins returned to their temporary residence beside the bone refinery. Strathome and Emily heaved a sigh of relief as they looked at Bollins. Emily remarked, "You handled it really well, Bollins. I'm proud of you." "I think Shatio did it on purpose. He wanted to provoke you into attacking him. For a moment, I was so worried that you would fall into his trap," said Strathome with admiration. But soon, he put on an angry face and remarked, "If we have the chance, we will skin Shatio alive." "What happened?" asked Sanguise and Gilbert simultaneously. Among the Han family, Sanguise and Gilbert were the closest to Bollins. They could tell from Emily and Strathome's reactions that something must have happened to Bollins. "Old guy, what happened?" "Shatio was..." Strathome recounted what took place in the meeting room with a cold face. After hearing the recount, without saying a word, Sanguise started marching out the building angrily. It appeared that he was going to draw blood. Gilbert roared and shouted as though he had gone mad, "Outrageous, outrageous. I've had enough of those fuckers. I'll kill them all. The two of you get back here." Strathome, Emily, Mike, and the others hastily shouted. They knew that if Sanguise and Gilbert walked out of the building and started killing those of the House of Chiron, a war would erupt and the House of Han might all perish with them in the Chiron residence. "You can continue to cower, but I won't do that any longer. I decide what I do with my life," shouted Gilbert angrily, as though it was him who had been insulted instead of Bollins. Gilbert and Sanguise possessed outstanding strengths. Strathome, Phoebe, and the others were unable to stop them from leaving. They were alarmed after seeing that the two wouldn't listen to their advice, and continued marching out the building to draw blood despite knowing that they would end up killing themselves. "Get back here," Bollins bunched his brows and coldly commanded. "Senior brother had said that the two of you must listen to my instructions while he is away." Bollins felt some warmth in his cold heart. The three usually hung out together and frequently had friendly duels with each other. As time passed, they had gradually formed a very strong bond. But, murmured Sanguise and Gilbert as they looked at Bollins. "We will have our revenge." Bollins looked at the two and calmly said, "But not today. Now is not the time yet. Do not jeopardize the entire House of Han with your recklessness." Sanguise and Gilbert stared at the icy Bollins. After a long while, they sighed and gave up on the idea. Chapter 897. More formidable than we thought. Chapter 897. More formidable than we thought. Inside a gymnasium in the Chiron residence, 3 divine guards of the House of Chiron were doing footwork practices in accordance with the scroll they received from the House of Han. The 3 nimbly moved all around the gymnasium in a tight formation, but they do not bump into each other. Shatio was sitting on a throne made of bones as he observed the 3 guards. He summoned the high god in charge of training the 3 to his side and asked, "So, they have learned the combat formation?" "I have been training them for the past 3 days in accordance with the footsteps and movements recorded on the scroll. Although they aren't the fastest learners and they have not fulfilled the requirement stated, we should see some effects by now." Shatio nodded and commanded, "Well then, let's find out if they would bring any effect." He randomly pointed at 3 of his family clan divine guards and sent them down to the battle arena. The selected 3 walked to the arena smilingly. They, along with many of the Chiron family, thought that those 3 practicing the combat formation had been wasting time, that the training method provided by the House of Han would be useless. Those divine guards who practiced the House of Han's demonic combat formation and those who did not were all late-stage mid-gods. Both sides had identical individual strengths. Finally, we will get to see if the training method is actually useful. If it's not, the House of Han is gonna get it. "Let the fight begin," shouted Shatio after those divine guards were at ready positions. The divine guards were fighting in close quarters. The 3 who had briefly practiced the demonic combat formation stood in a triangle with their backs facing inward. They would move around the arena as a unit without breaking from the formation. From above, they appeared as though a spinning triangle. Their opponents, who were wearing jolly and relaxed smiles, spread out. They simultaneously launched their first attack at those divine guards, constantly wandering around in a triangular formation. A miracle happened. Although the three had simultaneously attacked, two of the attacks missed their targets and only one of the wanderers. And immediately after, the three wanderers launched their counterattacks. They focused fire on one of their opponents and blasted him. He was sent flying backward. As everyone in the arena was divine guards of the Chiron family, and they were merely having a friendly match, they only attacked with a small portion of their power. The divine guard, who sent flying backward, immediately got back to his feet and quickly returned into the arena. He thought that it was just a lucky hit, and he had taken it too lightly. He rejoined his comrades, and they took a more cautious approach. The three launched their attack for the second time. Yet again, two attacks missed, and one of them got blasted off. They went forward again and again, and the three attackers were blasted out of the arena again and again. The three divine guards, employing a demonic combat formation, however, had always stayed within the arena and were never taken down. In the beginning, those Chiron family spectators were all in a jolly mood. But gradually, they became silent and their expressions turned grave. All of them watched the battle with their full attention. Shatio, who had been sitting lazily, was currently sitting with his back straightened and leaning slightly forward. His eyes opened wide and glistened with lights of excitement as he attentively watched his divine guards battle each other. After staring for a long while, he took a deep breath and instructed, "Stop, that is enough." Then he turned to the high-ranking members of his house and asked, "What do you think?" "Miraculous. Absolutely miraculous." One of them took a deep breath, and his eyes were glowing with excitement as he exclaimed, "The House of Han is indeed quite something. They have practiced the technique for just 3 days, and yet they could already unleash such formidable team combat power. Once they have mastered the technique, they would be even more powerful. Patriarch, it seems that we must obtain every secret of the House of Han. If we succeed, not just our House of Chiron, but even the overall strength of our Witherbone city will increase by folds," commented another senior member. Shatio nodded. In a determined face, he said, "Indeed, we must acquire all their secrets by all means necessary, no matter the price. One of our guards mysteriously disappeared yesterday night." Stratham wore a grave face as he said to Emily, "On the very first day we were here, we instructed them to never leave the compound without our command. They will never disobey our commands. Something's very wrong about this." Emily knew that none of the House of Han guards dared disobey their commands. From the day they entered the House of Han, they were trained to be loyal, to obey their master's command to the letter. And given the current situation they found themselves in, it was even more improbable that any of those guards would leave without permission. "Try to search all our activity areas and ask around for this person," suggested Emily. She had a feeling that someone sinister happened to the guard. "I have searched everywhere before coming to see you. I'm certain that he is not here." Stratham hesitated for a moment before he said, "Could it be?" Emily knew when Stratham meant to say, they were inside the Chiron residence. The activity area of the Han family was very limited. With it being impossible that a member of the House of Han would attack one of their own, this meant that the Divine Guard's disappearance was most likely of the House of Chiron's doing. "Cover it up for as long as possible." Emily wore a grave face as she said, "I do not want the House of Han guards to panic, but most importantly, I don't want Sanguis and Gilbert to do anything reckless. They have only started calming down about Balins being slapped. If they learn of this, all hell will break loose." Given their current circumstances, Stratham knew that their only option was to continue to silently endure it and do nothing. Being heavily outnumbered, any kind of struggle will only end badly for them. "I understand." Stratham's heart ached, but he nodded and accepted the difficult decision. "Sai, this is all my fault. We should have headed for the Space Dominion instead of the Death Dominion. Had we went there instead, none of these would have happened," remarked Emily after letting out a sigh. "Don't blame yourself, we all made that decision. At least we are still alive," replied Stratham. He let out a sigh and left with his head drooping. Under the Chiron residence, in an underground prison shrouded under layers of defensive barriers. In a prison cell sat a house of hand guard. There were bruises, wounds, and holes all over his body, with some made to expose his bones. Some of his fingers and toes were missing. His chest had been badly charred, and there were bizarre worms chirping as they happily munched on his rotting flesh. This house of hand guard had been tortured for an entire night and was barely recognizable. He had a numbed expression on his disfigured face, and his weary eyes were staring into emptiness. There was not an ounce of energy left in him. I clicked on, /I the prison gate was unlocked and slammed open. Château walked down the stairs with his brows bunched. He glanced at the dying house of hand guard with disgusted eyes before asking in an annoyed voice, "I have given you one night. Have you gotten anything yet?" The eerie-looking torturer put on a helpless expression and shook his head. Putting on a bitter smile, he answered, "Patriarch, I have seen many tough cases. However, this is the first time I have met someone who wouldn't budge to any kind of torture. I have used more than 20 different tools, but he wouldn't say a word." "What a useless bunch of rubbish," groaned Château coldly before he reprimanded in a deep voice. "I had spent so many black crystal coins every year on maintaining you, but you can't even do your job right. Not only are you wasting my crystal coins and time, but I also have to spend my divine energy to finish the job myself. Absolute trash. Brother-in-law, I really have tried my best." Not only that he wouldn't say a word, he had bit his tongue off. There really is nothing more that I could do. When the torturer saw that Château was angered, he immediately changed the appellation from patriarch to brother-in-law. It seemed that they were relatives. "He what?" Château was shocked by what he had heard. It wasn't that Château had never seen someone do it before, but for a random, average guard to do such a savage thing to himself, that was the first time he had seen it, and it terrified him. The prisoner they abducted was just a very ordinary guard of the House of Han, possessing merely mid-stage mid-god strength. He was pretty much a cannon fodder type of existence. And yet, this ordinary character was stauncher than even the toughest criminal god. If such a group of experts one day came to possess adequate strength, they would be completely unstoppable. It seems that I have to change my plan. No matter if the House of Han hand over those secrets, they will have to die. I cannot allow such a formidable threat to exist. I thought Château inwardly. He impatiently gestured to the torturer to be dismissed. After everyone exited the cell, and he was alone with the House of Han guard, Château went forward and pressed his hand on the dying guard. A hazy mist glowing with eerie green light enveloped the guard's skull. It rummaged through his mind and extracted memories from the depths of his divine soul. Moments later, Château withdrew. The House of Han guards had bled out from his 7 orifices and no longer had any signs of life. Château walked out from the cell in a grave face. When he was in front of his high gods, he instructed, "Tell the House of Han to hand over every training method of their demonic combat formations within 3 days. 3 days are all they have. Patriarch, did you obtain useful memories? What did you find out?" asked one of the high gods. "The House of Han is more formidable than we thought," exclaimed Château. From the memories of the guard, he learned that Han Shuo had killed Larixin's high gods on their way to Soaring Cloud Mountain Range, attacked Hushville City, defeating City Lord Hoffs, and other things. Château started getting worried. "Understood," replied the high gods immediately, then quickly went to Dagaci and gave the House of Han the ultimatum. On that night, Han Shuo, who had been speeding his entire journey, finally entered the domain of Witherbone City. At his current speed, he would reach the city within half a day. Chapter 898, Corner GDK 898. Corner Dagaci had relayed Château words clearly. The House of Han must surrender every last bit of their secrets to the House of Chiron within just 3 days. Otherwise, they will be exterminated. Emily, Phoebe, Strathome, Bollins, Sanguis, Gilbert, and other core members of the Han family gathered to discuss how to respond to the ultimatum. They were all wearing gloomy and grave faces. By now, it was obvious to Strathome that the missing House of Han guard must have been abducted by the House of Chiron. Otherwise, Château wouldn't have known about the existence of those remaining demonic combat formations. Emily and Strathome exchanged glances. They both knew that it was no longer necessary to conceal the matter. Strathome revealed to the party about the disappearance of one of their guards before he solemnly said, It seems that Sha Tio must have learned some secrets of our family clan from the guard. Otherwise, he wouldn't have suddenly demanded us to surrender all our secrets in just 3 days. I have personally trained every one of our guards, and I'm absolutely confident that they wouldn't say a word, remarked Bollins confidently after thinking for a moment. Before they were recruited into the House of Han, the guards had to pass thorough background checks and all sorts of personality tests. They would then be trained and tempered mentally and physically through various methods. These guards would place the interests of the House of Han above their own lives. And as a matter of fact, the House of Han guard who was abducted spoke not a word despite having been tortured. He had even bit his tongue off. Such was the faithfulness of a House of Han guard. Sha Tio cultivates the energy of death. As a late-stage high god, his mastery and understanding of the soul would be beyond our imagination. Fanny, who cultivated the energy of death, explained, I believe in the loyalty of our House of Han guards. But after a person dies, their memory and soul don't immediately vanish. Given Shada's strength, it wouldn't be too hard for him to extract some information from his soul. The party immediately understood what must have happened after hearing Fanny's explanation. It seems that this is as much time as we could buy. If Sha Tio learned the secrets of our House of Han from the Divine Guard's soul, then he will never ever let us off. No matter what we do, our only way out is death, said Emily after she sighed in despair. With things having come to this, even the optimistic Emily saw no hope of survival. Bollins, who still wore the same calmness and indifference on his face, in a firm, decisive voice, proposed, Then we shall wait no more. We will strike this very night and take as many kills as we can. Bollins had been very calm all along. It was him who had been keeping Sanguis and Gilbert from doing anything rash. He had followed Emily and Starthome's strategy to buy as much time as they could. He even endured an insult from Sha Tio. But surprisingly, he was also the first in proposing a kamikaze attack. Sanguis and Gilbert, who were prepared to do so a long time ago, had ferocious lights bursting from their eyes. They seemed strangely excited after hearing Bollins' words. Emily nodded firmly. In a resolute voice, she said, Tonight it is. We will give our lives to cause the greatest casualties to the House of Chiron. The House of Han may be annihilated, but we won't go down without a fight. It seemed as though she would welcome death with open arms. Emily looked at the faces of all those gathered before she suddenly smiled and said, But know that we will not die in vain. Brian will avenge our deaths. It will only be a matter of time. He will kill all those who have directly or indirectly participated in this. Let us disperse and take a quick rest. We will assemble before dawn and we will strike as one, said Bollins. As the instructor who had trained every House of Han guards, he was most capable of coordinating an assault, such as the one the House of Han was about to do. Those core members of the House of Han silently dispersed to take their possibly last recharge. Bollins then immediately assembled the House of Han captains, informing them about their upcoming plan and strategy. While the House of Han was quietly getting prepared, Sha Tio, the patriarch of the Chiron family, went to the city lord of Witherbone City at his mansion. He revealed the information he extracted from the soul of the House of Han guard to City Lord Hill. Hill was rather annoyed at first, thinking that it was not necessary for him to be briefed with every nitty-gritty detail. But after hearing that Han Shuo had killed many of Larixen's high gods and even forced Larixen and Felder to flee, his annoyance turned into shock. He put on a grave face and said to Sha Tio, Tell me everything you know about this guy in detail. There had been many rumors about the City of Shadow's House of Han, which had gotten their way to Sha Tio and Hill's ears. However, the two weren't people who would trust unverified news, and they were unaware of many of Han Shu's secrets. Therefore, Sha Tio and Hill had not taken Han Shu as a potential threat from the beginning. They may not believe in rumors, but they had absolute confidence in the memories of that guard's soul. Sha Tio explained all the previously unknown secrets about Han Shu to Hill. Both of them noticed the profound graveness in each other's eyes. Hill took a deep breath as he fiddled uneasily with his armrest made of bones. In a deep voice, he said, The House of Han must not be allowed to live. Not only must we make sure that they are all dead, but we also need to find a way to shift the blame on someone else. Fucking hell, it turns out that the guy is more terrifying than the rumors about him. If he comes to Witherbone City and finds out the truth, our city will surely be weakened. I have handed the House of Han a 3-day deadline, and I will use this time to get things set up. Those from the other dominions are on their way here. As long as we carefully plan everything out, it's possible to make a scapegoat of them. Shatio revealed his treacherous plan. Good, you have done well. When it is all over, you will be rewarded well, said Hill gladfully. He was pleased with Shada's performance so far. But suddenly, Hill bunched his brows. He turned to the divine guard who had just rushed into the room, and in an annoyed voice, he asked, "What are you so flustered about?" "City Lord, the Kyron residence is on fire. They seem to be under attack," replied the divine guard hastily. Shatio had put on a humble smile on his face after being praised by Hill, but after hearing the emergency report, his face froze for a moment before it instantly transformed into anger. He shouted, how dare they attack? I will tear every last one of them into pieces." Then, without even saying farewell to Hill, Shatio left and rushed for his Kyron residence. Hill knew that Shatio was anxious, and therefore was not offended by his lack of manners. He, too, immediately got up from his white throne and followed behind Shatio. Those divine guards of Hill's inside his mansion were not aware of the attack at Kyron residence. When they saw Shatio hastily dashing across the corridors with Hill following behind him, they thought that Shatio was escaping from Hill. Having misunderstood the situation, some of them aimed their divine weapons at Shatio, wanting to intercept him. "Don't fire, let him pass," shouted Hill as soon as he saw his divine guards raising their weapons. His voice resounded through the entire mansion. At the same time, an extravagant outsider had just entered Witherbone City through one of its city gates. "Hey, stop rig." "Never mind." Han Shuo did not bother letting those divine guards check his divine tablet. He just whooshed through the checkpoint in a flash. Those divine guards manning the city gate were about to chase after Han Shuo, but they suddenly saw the large amount of black crystal coins scattered on the ground. They pretended they saw no intruder and hastily helped themselves. After entering Witherbone City, Han Shuo grabbed a random midgod on the street and shoved a sack of black crystal coins into his hands. He hastily asked, "Where is the Kyron residence?" The midgod was disgruntled that Han Shuo had pulled him out of the blue. He was about to start cursing when he felt something hard and heavy in his hands. When he lowered his head and looked, his face turned from frowning to beaming ear to ear. Immediately, he pointed in a direction and happily answered, "Eastward all the way." As soon as he finished those words, Han Shuo vanished as though he had just popped out of existence. If it wasn't for the sack of black crystal coins in his hands, the midgod would have thought that he had been hallucinating, because Han Shuo moved so fast that he didn't even catch him leaving. In the Kyron residence, taking full advantage of the element of surprise, the House of Han managed to flatten more than half of the structures in residence in just a short time. Many of the Kyron family guards who were cultivating were killed before they could react. With many of the high gods and divine guards not ready and out of position, the House of Han had been unstoppable. They divided themselves into many small groups, taking ring-shaped formations to destroy and kill everything and anything they saw. Those flurried and disarrayed House of Kyron guards were ruthlessly slaughtered. In less than 15 minutes, 100 or more of the House of Kyron were butchered. Meanwhile, the House of Han guards had only suffered several injuries. However, the tide soon turned against them. After the great number of House of Kyron high gods were assembled, when those divine guards of Hills stationed around the residence began their counterattacks, the House of Han was pushed back. As the city lord's mansion house was relatively nearby the Kyron residence, Shatio, the Kyron family patriarch, soon returned to his residence. The city lord of Witherbone City also had shown up after Shatio. Upon seeing the two late-stage high gods, every member of the House of Han understood that their end was nigh. Chapter 899, The Demon arrives. Chapter 899. The demon arrives. The moment that Hill and Shatio appeared, the House of Han's struggle was basically over. Both Hill and Shadu possessed late-stage high god strength. Other than the two, there were also 5 high gods of different stages of the Kyron family. In addition, the 2 divine guard chiefs stationed outside the Kyron residence also possessed high god strength. Thousands of divine guards were also rushing to the residence from every part of the city. This great disadvantage that the House of Han was in cannot be negated merely with combat formations. Sha Tio was fuming when he returned to his Kairan residence and saw all the buildings that the House of Han had collapsed and the bodies of those they killed. He was so angered that he wished to skin every member of the House of Han. Hill had arrived at the Kairan residence at the same time with Sha Tio. He too saw the tremendous losses suffered by the House of Kairan and that the House of Han guards were gradually retreating and defending themselves in a bizarre combat formation. However, not only did Hill not feel sad for the Kairan family's losses, but he was secretly delighted. In Witherbone City, the House of Kairan was the only family clan that could pose a real threat to his position as the city lord. But as Sha Tio had always been loyal and devoted to him, Hill couldn't find any excuse to diminish the House of Kairan's strength. He could not be happier to see the Kairan residence be covered with fire and blood. It was also a proof of the great team combat strength of the House of Han. By now, the House of Han had been completely encircled by thousands of divine guards of Witherbone City. Hill was excited to think that the Witherbone City would soon obtain the secret formulas to their miraculous medicines and their extremely deadly demonic combat formations. "How dare you attack us? You are asking for death," shouted Sha Tio. He was giving Ballins, Strathome, Emily, and the others a death stare. It was as though he wanted to tear their flesh and devour them alive. "We had enough of your intimidation and bullying." Emily angrily replied, "You will have us killed no matter what we do. If you won't let us live, the least we could do is make you bleed." "Well, very well then." Sha Tio put on a ruthless face, gestured, and commanded, "Kill them all. Show no mercy." A large number of divine guards and high gods had surrounded the House of Han. They temporarily ceased fire when Sha Tio and Hill arrived, but upon hearing Shata's command, they no longer hesitated and charged forward. Knowing that the House of Han's demonic combat formation was incredibly miraculous and deadly, Sha Tio was not counting on the large number of his Kairan family divine guards. Instead, he was relying on his high number of high gods. He instructed the high gods to take the brunt, while his Kairan family divine guards would be launching ranged energy projectiles from a safe distance. 5 high gods under Sha Tio and 2 high gods under Hill surrounded the House of Han from 7 directions. The thousands of Witherbone City divine guards aimed their divine weapons at the House of Han. The House of Han had no choice but to clump up and hold their ground. They knew that the Kairan residents must have been heavily surrounded by divine guards from all over the city. If they were to try to escape from the encirclement, they would be rather vulnerable and easily crushed by those Witherbone divine guards who had greatly outnumbered them. They thought that it was better to stay on their ground and kill those who come to them, inflicting the maximum harm at the cost of their own lives. The House of Han understood that they had an advantage over their enemy in team combat strength. If they were to spread out, they would lose the only advantage they have. Not only would the House of Han hasten their doom, but they would also fail in causing significant harm to their enemies. Every member of the House of Han wore calm faces, despite facing certain doom. They were ready to put up what would likely be their final fight. 7 high gods begin charging at them from 7 directions. A dark, cloud-like canopy formed using the energy of death shrouded the Kairan residence, while dazzling radiances burst from the remaining energy towers. The massive, ominous dark cloud slowly hovered to where those of the House of Han gathered. The 7 high gods unfurled their domains of divinity. Various elemental energies in the environment were assembled to form bizarre energy streams. When the 7 energy streams made by the 7 high gods shot towards the House of Han, it set a chain of deadly events into motion. Thousands and thousands of colorful energy blasts rose into the sky and whistled towards the House of Han. There were also bone spears thrown. They were the top quality products manufactured from renowned bone refineries using the highest quality of materials.